Lance, welcome to Pros and Cons, and love to hear your story. What you got?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me over. Super excited to do this, and always excited to be able to share my story and get some feedback on that. We had a chance to talk a little bit earlier, but the short version of the long story is back in 2003, I was in a delayed entry program for the Air Force, was going to go into Special Forces pararescue. My goal was to jump out of airplanes and save people, and ended up not being able to do that because I got in a car accident. Went to a baseball game here in Fort Myers and ended up having a couple beers at the game and drove home and had a friend in the car with me and ended up getting in an accident and wrecked the car and killed my friend in that accident. So instead of going into the Air Force, I ended up going to prison for 5 years.
Vehicular manslaughter?
DUI manslaughter. So there was alcohol in my system. So that's a whole nother long story about issues with the car and everything. But, I made the choice to have a drink and drove home and paid the consequence of that. And my friend paid the ultimate consequence. Now I try to do as much as possible to live my life in honor of him and just really make a difference with my life as much as I can now. And really my biggest thing is giving back to the community. I feel like I took advantage of the community in a way, just not knowing what I had until it was all taken away, and literally everything was taken away. And I learned the hard way and went through the system and learned that the system is broken and there's ways that we can fix it, but I found a way through. So I ended up doing the 5 years in prison. I got a 10-year sentence, did 5 years in and 5 years on probation.
Okay, the common sentence for vehicular manslaughter DUI is
10 to 15.
10 to
yep.
15, correct?
Yep. And so I did 10, 5 in, 5 out. While I was in, I started to kind of have, a spiritual awakening. It was like very early in, I kind of was touched in a way that I had this spiritual guidance to go through. And as I started to get into that, something happened out of my control and I ended up in confinement for 60 days. And as I was on this journey,
speak on that, please.
Yeah. So as I got the DR. So DR is the direct report for your or disciplinary report. And then you get one of those, you get in trouble. So the DR was for inability to provide a sample for a urinalysis. So couldn't pee in time. And the officer ended up locking me up and put me in for 60 days for that.
Were you using behind the wall, or you
Nope.
just couldn't pee in time?
Nope. I was out playing football out in the yard, and he pulled me in, gave me a little 2-ounce cup of water, said, drink this, and left me outside and came back and got me and said, if you can't go in the next 5 minutes, I got to lock you up. I was like, so.
And for the people that don't understand, not being able to go, diluting your urine, all equivalents to a negative,
Yep.
to a failed result.
So even though I tried to go later, they wouldn't let me. And then I knew that I didn't actually do anything wrong. So I had this idea. I had written up a whole argument. They give you a hearing, which doesn't really mean anything, but they give you a hearing. So I argued my case, and he's like, yeah, but you didn't go. So 60 days. So in that idea that God's got my back, God knows I didn't do anything wrong in this instance. Instead of being mad about it, which I'd been mad at God for a long time building up to this, instead of being mad about it, I was like, all right, I'm supposed to learn something from this. So I took those 60 days and kind of turned it into an ashram, like my prayer room, and just worked on my spirituality, worked on myself. It was either I had to deal with my demons or my demons were going to deal with me. And being in an 8x10 cell for 60 days by myself, you're going to figure it out or it's going to break you. So thankfully I figured it out. I came out of there with a whole new understanding of how the prison system worked, and realized that if this is as bad as it gets, this is kind of dumb. Like I'm in jail. I'm removed from a society that's already removed from society. But I'm in an 8x10 cell by myself. I don't have to worry about anybody. I got to focus on just me for that little bit.
And a lot of time to think.
Yeah. And I tell people all the time, like, I kind of feel like I have an unfair advantage because I had everything stripped away. I had to deal with myself. The only thing that was in the room was me. So I had to focus on that. they call it a dopamine fast when you get off of Facebook and get off of playing video games and not looking at screens. Prison is very much a dopamine fast. Everything's gray, everything's the same color, the food's pretty terrible, like you're not getting a lot of stimulation in any way. So to have all of that removed and to be able to focus on, these are my personal issues, these are the things that I can see, from my perspective that need to be worked on. All that happened while I was in this cell. So I come out and I have a whole new idea of like how I'm going to get through the system. So now, instead of being scared the whole time that I'm going through this, now I'm starting to be innovative. I'm starting to look at different things and how can I do this? How can I do that? And I ended up with a decent job as a staff canteen operator, which is a tough job to get, but good if you can hold on to it. And then I went to a work release center. And at this work release center, they were really focusing on rehabilitation. Like, it was actually one of the better situations. And unfortunately, that place has closed. So one of the good things has now closed, which seems to happen way too often.
Where it's more focused on, we should be focused on rehabilitation, is more focused on just kind of getting people through the system and back out. And when they get back out, they fall right back into the same situation all over again.
They get caught up in that current, man, and that whirlpool will just bring you down. So I was at this work release center. It's called Bridges of America. There was different programs you could do, different things you could get into. There was a culinary program there. There was like AA and different substance abuse counseling. There was all kinds of counselors there. I just kept wanting to do stuff. So I just kept asking, can I do this? Can I do this? And I kept getting yeses. So we started a Toastmasters club in this group.
You and for clarification, and you mean being a teacher of these things to kind of continue getting points and different things that would earn you better points in the board and the early release? And
so all of those are somewhat options now, but those weren't options for me. I did this because this was for me to do.
Understood.
And number one, I was bored and I don't like to sit still for too long. So it was, my mind's always working. What can I do? What can I do? How can I improve myself? And how can I improve others around me? So, like I said, Toastmasters, which is a public speaking forum. It's an international group. They speak, they have these small classes, usually at colleges, and you go in and you learn to become a public speaker. Well, I started this group with 36 guys and got it approved by the warden of the facility, and ended up 33 of those guys never went back to prison,
Okay, so to rewind a little bit, you say this is something you picked up in college, but you didn't speak on that. What is your educational prior to the Air Force and the accident?
Yeah, so I graduated high school, and then I went to Bowling Green State University for 2 years after that. I quit school to kind of go figure out my life because wasn't doing real well in school and wasn't focused at all. I ended up moving to Colorado, and that was when I was a chef at this time too. So I was working in a really nice restaurant in Boulder, Colorado. Had a good trajectory that I could have went if I stayed in the restaurant industry, but it's the restaurant industry. You gotta have the heart for that to stay in it. But
was alcohol part of your life at this time?
Yes. Yep. So
was anything else a part of your life?
I started to dabble. I started to smoke weed,
Okay.
At this point. It wasn't really until after the accident was when I really got, so it was 3.5 years between the accident and me going to prison.
Gotcha.
And that was the time when I started to get into my drug use. And it was pretty much, if you're going to put it in front of me, I'll do it, and then I'll ask you what it is. I was essentially trying to party myself to death. Because
a coping mechanism for obviously the accident, and it wasn't just that there was a victim, it was a manslaughter or it was a homicide. It was literally your best friend that was in the passenger side.
Yeah, so the guilt was pretty strong, and my dad was sick at the time, so there's multiple things that are going on. And that really, and I'm looking at 15 years, so I'm just trying to put a Band-Aid so I don't have to deal with this until I have to deal with it. And like I said, I did anything that was put in front of me.
When you were in college, educational, athletic, was there anything?
Yeah, I played hockey in college and was going to school to become a teacher. I wanted to be a biology teacher. But that I really should have gone in the military sooner. I should have not went to school and went in the military sooner. And the reason I say that is because I see how well that I did with the structure in prison, that I know had I gone in the military that I would have done really, really well there. So it was kind of like I caught my path too late and then made a bad decision and lost my path completely. And since then, I've always got that in the back of my mind of like, what could have been. You know, we all have those decisions that we made have been like, oh, if I'd only done this different. You know, mine unfortunately involves somebody else being here or not. So there's a lot of guilt that comes with that, and a lot of it took a long time for acceptance. And part of why I do the work that I do now is because it's to honor him, and it's to get so that other people understand things can happen to anybody. You know, I came from a really good household. If you were to look at my background, you'd never think I'd end up in prison. But I did, because I was dumb. You know, I made the mistake and the decision to have alcohol and then get in my car.
Did the childhood that you were raised in, was it too lenient, or did it work against you, or did it work in your favor? Do you feel like now, looking back at it, that you're more mature looking at the situation?
I put it this way: I couldn't have had a better scripted childhood had Hollywood written it. You know, one for nothing. Grew up on a horse farm, Northwest Ohio. Dad worked a great job. You know, my mom was a stay-at-home mom and extra loving and caring. Like, you really could not write a better script for how to grow up. I don't think it was too lenient. There was obviously stuff I got away with, but the biggest thing was my own ego. Not so much trying to get away, because it wasn't until I left home that I started to really get out of control, because I didn't drink in high school. I didn't do anything in high school. I waited until I got out of school. Then I started drinking in college. And then, you know, like I said, after.
Do you think that it was a little bit of the slingshot effect?
That I did too much too fast?
Where maybe you were more sheltered in the beginning, and then when you hit.
Not necessarily.
When you hit the world, you kind of.
Yeah, I could see
the opposite direction real fast.
A little bit. Yeah, because it was like, all the strings are cut, you know?
Right.
So, yeah, there was some of that when I went to college. But again, the decision that I made, you know, I wasn't out robbing banks. I wasn't out, you know, slinging on the streets.
You were just drinking a couple beers here.
Yeah, I was at a baseball game. I was
right. Who doesn't
being the
pay $12 for
waiting
a beer
to go
in
the Air Force and the Special Forces, and I'm at a baseball game and I had a couple beers at the game.
Right.
You know,
and normal dude stuff.
I'll put it out there. My BAC for the accident was .083.
Oh, so you were just literally
3,000
just a hair over.
Yep. So, and in all honesty, I could have fought it. I could have went to court and done it, but my friend's gone, man, and I was driving. I'm not gonna fight that. I want that to be over with. I want his family to be, you know, not have to deal with that anymore. Let me take my punishment, and I'll do what I got to do. And now I've had the opportunity to come home and really take my experiences and try to help other people not fall into those same mistakes.
And that's real tough, because I think 10 out of 10 lawyers would tell you, give you the opposite, you know, advice. But taking responsibility for what we do and our actions that we made are so important in life. You know, could you have not blown? Could you have waited and got back to the precinct? Maybe you could have done all that, I'm sure. But would you be the person that you are today and look at life the way you are through the lenses you're looking at them if you had made that decision, you know? And do you regret making that decision today, or do you feel like it was the best decision you made because it turned you into the person you are now?
I tell people a lot, and it's hard to fathom that if I had to go through, aside from losing my friend, but if I had to go through everything else that I went through to get to be the person I am today, I would do it.
I love that.
And that's not an easy thing to think about. Like, 5 years in prison is 5 years in prison, man. And
did you spoke on, and I'm gonna kind of peel the onion back a little bit. You spoke on your spiritual journey. Did you have that before, or did you have a coming to Jesus moment while you were behind the wall?
So I grew up in the Catholic church, went to Catholic school for elementary school, and then went to high school and was very angry at God, and just being an angry adolescent male, for no real reason, you know, listening to like Rob Zombie and, you know, Marilyn Manson music and thinking that, you know, everything's terrible when nothing is bad. So I grew up in that kind of, where I kind of went the opposite direction from what I grew up in. The night before I went to prison, the night before my sentencing, I'm driving my Jeep Wrangler. There's no top, there's no doors on it. Going down the road, I let go of the wheel and I look up at the sky and I say, if you're sending me to jail, just take me out now. And this beat up old Jeep that wobbles all over the place stayed straight. I got to the road that went to my house and turned into there and said, all right, we're doing this. And it was 2 weeks in, scared.
So either God was talking to you.
Yep.
Or you had
God,
really,
God
really
put
good
me
alignment.
on this path, man. Like, even the bad parts, God put me on this path because those are the parts that I learned from.
Right.
You know, and
let's get back to the point when you first get in, before you go to the SHU, segregated housing unit. What kind of laws were in place that didn't work for a felon that you noticed in the beginning that were never going to be changed? At least you felt that way.
Yeah. So specifically going into the Miami Reception Center, Governor Christ was on the news about something, and his nickname was Chain Gang Charlie back at the time. So he's the one who brought the chain gang back. And it was the specific story on the news was about 65%, because right now you have to serve 85% of your sentence. They've been talking about 65%. Even when I go to Tallahassee now, they still talk about 65%. It would save the state over $1 billion over 10 years. You know, there's all kinds of extra benefits to cutting it down. I don't necessarily agree with cutting it down to 65%. I feel like that might be too much, because I was in for a certain amount of time that God put me in there because I was supposed to learn something up until that last minute, and that's how it worked. But as I'm watching this, and I'm like, man, that's never going to happen. I'm 6 weeks in, and I'm looking at, oh man, if they could change it to 65%, that means I get out this much earlier.
Absolutely.
But I'm like, that's never going to happen. There's nobody out there that does this work or cares about us in here. And that moment, I didn't realize how big of a moment it was until 10 years later, and had the opportunity to go through everything and to get involved. And I ended up becoming the person that I didn't believe existed. And that's a really crazy realization to have, that you didn't think something existed, and now you are that thing that is now it has come about. So
for the ones that don't know, the state of Florida runs the timeline for minimum mandatory and early release the same way that the federal prison system does, where they do 85% out of 100% of the time. So if you get in trouble in another state, you can get a 20-year sentence and be out in 5-10 years. You get in trouble in the state of Florida and you get in trouble for 10 years, you're going to do 8.5 years of that. And then may have to do a halfway house or a supervised release or a probation period after the fact.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up, because not only the time, but just there's all kinds of different rights and rules that are different state to state. Like, you can be incarcerated in the state of Maine and vote. Down here, 2018, we just got the right to vote to restored to people with felony convictions. So that was Amendment 4.
And speak a little bit on how you played a part in that happening.
Yeah, that was I met with the group, the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, and met with their deputy director, Neil Voles, and I sent him a message through Facebook. He responded back within an hour. 2 hours after that, I was sitting down with him and sharing my story, and hadn't really shared it with anybody or really knew what to do with myself at that point, but he kept popping up on my Facebook. So I reached out to him and shared my story. He's like, man, this is great. So I got involved with them, and I was able to give a conservative voice to the organization, really focusing on more of the conservative circles, going into Republican clubs, going into the governor's office, going into a lot of adversaries that are on the conservative side that didn't necessarily understand what we were trying to do. Because a lot of times people are like, oh, it's just a big push from the left. They just want to register voters. They want to do all this. And here I am as a Republican being like, no, I want my right to vote back. Like, there are more of us that want our rights restored than there are numbskulls that are going to just register and go back to jail. And so that's why I share my story so much, is because I want people to understand there are more people like me that have made mistakes, that aren't out slinging and doing stuff, or there are people that have made those decisions, that have clearly made a decision to not do those things anymore. Those are the people that we need to bring in back into the fold. We want to become, we call ourselves returning citizens. We want to be full citizens again. And I will be a returning citizen until I'm able to get a pardon. Once I get my pardon, then I'll have all my rights back and I'll be a full citizen again.
And if you got sentenced with time and you did your time respectfully, I think that you should be considered back into the community as a regular person, just like anybody else, almost like you're born again.
Yeah. And most people feel that way. And that's how Amendment 4 passed, is most people actually believe that, but we're so inundated with what you see on TV or what you see in the movies that when you think of prison, you think of the worst possible things, when there's some really bad people in there. Most of us are just made a mistake and want to go home, man. 95% of us that are in there want to go home and are going to go home at some point. And we have zero safety net for them to come home to get caught in, One of my goals is I'd love to get this mentor program that I was trying to get started with the sheriff's department, where people like myself that have found success on the other side go in and mentor these guys. And so when they tell us this is what I'm feeling, or this is the drug that I miss, or this is whatever's going on with them, you can understand them a lot more, and you have that compassion and that empathy for them because you know exactly what it is they're going through.
Absolutely. I think that for a lot of us, myself included, it's very hard for me to take advice from somebody that's never been there, done that. And when somebody's telling me something and I know they've walked the walk and they've come out on the other side, I take that very well. And I say, well, if he can do it, I can do it. Or he understands the struggle that I'm going through or the situation I've been in. When they haven't, it's a little one-off. And so I think that's major. And I think that God has put us through certain things in life so that we can turn around and help other people that are going to be going through that, and maybe even better, catch them before they even start. The youth, the ones that are in high school, the ones that are just becoming young men and women. So mentorship is great, and any city, any county should take full advantage of this type of program.
Yeah, and to see the difference, especially like I go in, and talk to somebody and they kind of give me a look, and then I tell them my story, like, oh, I didn't even think that you would have done any time in here. Like when we met earlier, just the way you started talking, I was like, all right, I know what's up,
Yeah.
So
I definitely did not think that we were going to go down that line.
Right.
I thought we were going to just have, Taco Tuesday.
Right.
So to hear you say that, you did a 10-year bid, I was kind of, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You don't look like the typical part that, when you see on TV, the guy with the tattoos on the face and the shaved head, you have a real, it actually probably benefits us with the different places you've been able to put yourself in, that you come from a good home, that you went to college, that you're very well spoken, and that you can be the voice for people like us that may not know how to express ourselves, but are regular human beings that want to be able to vote, that want to be a normal person in society, that want to be able to help others and don't want to be looked at for one or a couple mistakes that we made in our life when we've given the effort to really change that, and we paid our price.
I tell people I took my biggest mistake and made it my best asset. I took the thing that's supposed to break me down and not let me back up, and instead that's the thing I stand on top of now. So instead of it being on my shoulders weighing me down, instead it's now lifted me up, so now I'm above the crowd. And I wish everybody didn't have to go through what I went through, but could learn what I learned. You know what I mean? Just how I had that break and that ability to have that self-introspection. I wish everybody could do that, man. I wish everybody could take 2 months and just be like, I'm going to go in this hole and I'm going to deal with myself, because you come out completely different,
It's almost like you did your 40 nights and
right. Yeah. Yeah.
And you fasted and you went out, and I think you said a good word earlier where you remove the dopamine effect of the day to day. And when you're in a place where you have nothing but literally with the clothes you got on your back and whatever you carry in your locker, I think you really appreciate, yourself a lot more, and you go into your head, you got and a lot of people actually go crazy. I've seen people in the shoe behind the wall that do not come back the same person they went in, and it's not always for the best. So you get out of this. Let's go back to that. You do your 60 days, you get out, you join the commissary. You're one of the people that run the commissary, and now you're kind of putting yourself in a place that I'm assuming that you're kind of dibbling in both worlds, where you're dealing with the inmates, but because you're running the commissary, you're hand in hand with the officers.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and it was the staff canteen too. So it was like I'm only dealing with officers coming to the window. Honestly, it was a blessing to be put in that position, because that again gave me the ability to learn so much more about the process and the system and how people act. Because when you have a classification officer that comes to your dorm and they're mad that they got to come to the dorm, or you got to go see them for some reason, they just want to get their job done. But when they come to the window and they're like, oh, I want to buy some Skittles, it's like, it's a completely different attitude. And
so staff, sorry to cut you, staff has a commissary window,
yep,
just like inmates have a commissary window,
with about 4 times as much stuff in it. But yeah,
gotcha.
Same vendor and everything, but it's just their little lunch window. But I remember I had an officer that was considered one of the worst officers on the compound, just always mean, always angry, never nice. Even if you were a good person, like, he's just not a nice person. And he used to get so mad because I would just be extra nice to him. Like, he'd come up and I'd always tell him, have a great day and everything. And finally one day he comes up and he sets this little Tupperware thing down and walks away, and there's a little note on it. And he's like, I didn't give this to you. And it was some homemade ham and beans, man. And it was so good. But this dude who's just nasty, wants to put down on everybody because I was nice to him every day and he never broke me, ended up showing me some kindness, man. Like, and
it was his way to show you, say thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and that's the resiliency to be able to go through that is, that's probably the hardest part for a lot of people, is they get in there. It's not a normal situation. And if you're not comfortable with yourself, that's when everything goes wrong. And you see that in society. That's not just in the prison system. When you're not comfortable with yourself, that's when you see the breakdown in society. And so when you're in there and you can't be comfortable in your own skin, that's when you start to lash out. That's when all these other things happen. That's when the little gangs start to get together. Was I an angel? No. But did I do anything bad? No. But I was just like,
as with the charges you had being a Caucasian male,
mm-hmm.
did you have to join a car? Mm-hmm. Did you have to, or were you independent?
I was independent, but I had connections. Another thing about working up front in the staff canteen is anybody wanted anything, I had the ability to get it done. And the way that I made that work for me was I never, ever asked for anything in return. Somebody wanted a bunk change. I knew who their classification officer was. They come to my window, be like, hey, so-and-so would really like to get a bunk change. If you could do something, that'd be cool. That's as much as I did. Like, that was my lick, was I was able to go in, and if somebody needed something, I had the ability to go do that job. But I told people straight up, don't ever ask me to bring anything back. Don't ever ask me to do anything that causes me to lose this job. I will do everything in my power to do. If you need help with administration, I'll try and get it done as best as possible. And most of the time, because of my demeanor and how I present myself, most of the time that stuff got done pretty easy.
So even in a situation where they've stripped you of everything, you've figured out a way to utilize your leverage in a way that works in your benefit.
Yeah.
That kind of kept any problems off of you, because at the end of the day, you were kind of a golden goose where people didn't want to mess that up.
Yep. Yeah. And
a lot of people don't have there's a hidden law, behind the wall where you don't really talk to officers, and you definitely don't talk to them by yourself. Mm-hmm. So if there's somebody that has that, that the ear, it can definitely work in your favor if you're good with that person.
Yeah, and that's one of the few jobs where you actually get paid to do it. So you get $75 a month.
Okay.
I didn't necessarily need it, so what I would do is on payday I'd go and I'd treat part of the dorm and buy everybody like a can of Coke or something,
which is a huge deal.
Yeah, so 30 guys in the dorm got cans of Coke because I got paid. And the only thing I ever asked for in return for anything was like, make sure nobody messes with me when I sleep. So I'd sleep sound because I had the whole dorm watching my back, because if anybody needed anything,
they wanted the Coke.
They
wanted that can of Coke.
Yeah. So it was little stuff like that.
And when you say nobody mess with you sleep, you're probably talking about, a lock in a sock or a soap bar in a sock.
Thankfully, I didn't have to worry about too much of that type of stuff. But it was, but yeah, it was just in general. You know, I don't want anybody messing with me. I mean, there's things that happen on other sides of the door.
Rape, all kinds of different things.
One of the craziest things I saw was a guy, young white kid, went to go hit the big black dude and had a lock in a sock, and he swings the sock, and as he gets to the apex, the lock came out of the sock, and he hits the guy with a soft sock.
Oh wow, yeah.
So white dude ended up in the infirmary that night,
right out of a movie.
Yep. So that was bad. But for the most part, like, I never had to defend myself. Never had to. There was a couple times where, you know, some of the guys that liked other guys would come up and be like, "Hey, what are you doing?" You know, and like, "I'm walking." You know,
Sun Tzu says the greatest battles are won without having to step a foot on the battlefield. Yeah.
So bringing up Sun Tzu, I read 596 books while I was in there. The Art of War was one of them. The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand were two of my favorite books that I read in there, and they're very long and very small print. So I don't think I'd have ever read them had I not been in that situation. And those two books changed my life. So again, it's looking back, like, it's amazing that I can look back at something so terrible with rose-colored glasses and be like, there are good points of this. And now I'm at the point where it's like, there were more good points than there were bad points. The bad points were, I'm not home, I miss my family, this sucks. But the good points were like, man, I made some good friends, I made some great ideas. I kind of told everybody when I first came out, I have all these different ideas in a box, and it was just, you know, but as soon as I hit the gate, it was kind of like everything kind of went up in the air because I'd been working on this stuff for so long. And then you hit that gate. My hardest day in prison was the day I got out, because I came home thinking I'm going to be able to do these things, and there are so many roadblocks set up that I couldn't do any of them. So I went back to work in the restaurant industry, and eventually got into real estate, and eventually got into drones.
And seeing that, how did that pave the way to where it led you afterwards, knowing that I have all these good ideas, I'm intelligent enough, my IQ is high enough, but because I'm marked and I got a felony on my back, now I'm handicapped from being able to proceed with 99 out of 100 one of these items in this box.
Yeah. A lot of it has been trying to find good business partners, trying to find good people that understand where I'm coming from. Thankfully, I'm able to elaborate enough that I can get my points across, and people are like, oh, that makes sense. The biggest thing for me is that, first off, I love shocking people with, be like, oh, I did 5 years in prison, you know, because I'll say it very nonchalantly, like when we first meet, and people are like, what, you know, so it catches them off guard a little bit. But I lead my story in a way that I try to be as authentic and upfront about it, so that you're not getting to know the crime, you're getting to know the whole situation. You're not getting to know that it says DUI manslaughter on my casework. You're getting to know that I personally made a bad decision. I lost a friend, and I went through this terrible situation afterwards, but came out on top regardless. So, because I'm able to do that, that's why, like, when I share these ideas and these things, I do get people to back me. But first coming home, man, it's real hard. Because
how would you say that decision that happened that day, that moment, and that loss, I apologize for the loss of your friend, shaped the rest of your life?
At the very moment, I remember thinking, everything's gone. Like, because I'm in the middle of the street. I wake up and I don't know where I'm at. My car's over there. My friend's over there. And I go find him, and he ends up dying in my arms. And I remember thinking, I'm supposed to leave for the Air Force in a month. And then I passed out. And woke up in the hospital. Actually, I woke up in the helicopter. And then just for that 3.5 years from accident to prison, again, like I said, I was just trying to party myself to death. I was trying to commit suicide without actually doing it, because I didn't know what life was anymore, and I might not have even cared what life was at that point, because now I'm responsible for taking that away. Everything else that I've ever felt or done, or nothing compares to that feeling of, and nothing will ever take away, I'm responsible for somebody's death.
Do you feel like you identify as just that story, or are you so much more because that part of your life has happened?
It's so much more. It's definitely so much more. It's not that's the only thing. That is a foundational piece for me, because I don't ever want to get rid of it. You know what I mean? Like, I accept it. I know that it's happened.
It shaped the person that I'm in front of today.
Knowing that no matter what, there's nothing that I can change to get Matt back here. You know, so that makes it really hard as far as really focusing on what I want to do. Also, what could Matt have done, you know, and
his potential.
Yeah, and so I try to do more.
And how old was he?
He was 30. I was 24.
Okay.
So,
and how is your relationship with his family since then, if any?
So it's his mom. I didn't even really know his mom, and then his dad passed away. Okay. But his stepmom was pretty rough for a while, and she made my life pretty rough when I came home. But you know, I came home in 2011, so it's been 14 years. It'll be 14 years February 5th.
When you were going to court, did they do a victim statement and all that kind of stuff?
No, because I ended up taking a plea bargain. So okay, that's how I got the 5 and 5.
If you would have took it to trial and lost, then you would have maxed out 15.
Yeah. So, and in all honesty, you know, with everything that was there, I potentially could have won my trial. But again, I didn't want to put anybody else through that. I wanted to accept responsibility for it. Matt's girlfriend at the time, she and I have the same tattoo on our back. So like after he passed away, he had a favorite Notre Dame hat, and so we both have a shamrock on our back, which, you know, it's not only is it my cross to bear, but he's pushing me forward all the time. So, and that's kind of really the dichotomy of specifically like what that means to me, is because, you know, the shamrock is the sign of the cross, and it is very much my cross to bear, but it's also the thing that pushes me forward the most. And so I love that I have that back there. And, you know, we went, and it was his girlfriend, so we went after this had all happened. And as you've got to know me over the last few hours, you know, I don't have any animosity towards people, and clearly this was an accident. And so it was really hard for me to not just be like, I'm so sorry, and give them a hug and do whatever I could to make it better. But at the same time, I totally understand any animosity they had towards me. So I don't have any ill will towards them whatsoever. I completely understand anything they feel towards me. It pains me that I can't ever do anything about it.
Right. And you being spiritual, I think your faith lies in wanting to be more like Christ. Mm-hmm. And to be more like Christ, you have to be able to forgive, to be forgiven. And that's a tough pill to swallow, because they've lost a child. Mm-hmm. So it's easier said than done. So it's can't be upset with anybody. You know, you just kind of wear that cross like you're wearing the shamrock. Yep. So going back to prison, you went to prison. You worked 18 months commissary. You bounced around a little bit. Usually they ship you around. Mm-hmm. You ended up in a location where you ended up training some canines.
Yeah. So I was at Belglade, which is out in the center of the state, just south of Lake Okeechobee. It's called the Muck. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's all silt sand and great for growing crops, but not much else out there. So my job, I was on the canine unit, and my job was to run tracks. So what they do is they'd let me go, and I would run off into the field, and then they'd let the dogs go a little while, and the dogs come find me. And it was bloodhounds, so it's not like they were coming to attack me. They're just sniffing me down. And I give them a couple treats, and we go get back in the truck and go do it again somewhere else. So I'm running a track through the sugarcane middle of Central Florida, and come busting out the end of a field onto a golf course, and there's 4 old guys standing up there on the golf course and holding their putter.
And this prisoner jumps out of the bushes.
And I come out of the bushes in my prison blues. You know, we're a half mile from the prison. I'm in my prison blues, and I say, oh, and I turn around and run back in the field. As I'm running back to get back to the sergeant, I hear his siren, and that means get back. So I come back, and he's like, we got to go. He's like, you just escaped. It's like, what? So what happened is they called the cops, seeing that an inmate was running around out in the sugarcane, and I was out doing my job, and instead I accidentally escaped. So
now having an escape on your back, which is pretty much the one of the worst things you can get.
Yeah, so I didn't get charged with it. It was just I was missing for count, but they were worried about whether I might do that, so they shipped me into 17 different facilities over the next 4 years.
So that kind of changed the trajectory of the rest of your prison sentence.
Yeah. So, but I did most of my time at Mayo CI, which is up in the Big Bend area. Again, out in the middle of nowhere. It's paper mill area, and then from Mayo, I went down to the Bridges of America, which is the work release, and then that was where I finished up my time there. But in between there, they moved me all over the place. Man.
So 2011, you get out. Mm-hmm. You've been multiple facilities. That portion's over. Now you're starting state, so you're starting probation.
Yep.
5 years.
Yep.
And then now you're on probation. You're living where?
I'm in Fort Myers.
You're in Fort Myers, and you go back. You had a box of ideas, but you're going back to what you know. Mm-hmm. You as a cook. So you're back in the kitchen.
Yep. So ended up going back to the restaurant I was working at before. That turned out terrible. And then just stayed in the restaurant industry for a while. And
is this because you felt at the moment that you were limited on opportunities?
That was kind of the path of least resistance. So I knew I could work in that. So I went, and I was like, I just need to find a job. So I went back into the restaurant industry and, worked at a couple of different places. The last restaurant I worked at was in 2013, which ended up being a really nice restaurant out on Sanibel, and became a chef out there and became certified and did all that stuff. So the pathway had a clear course, but the lifestyle that comes with the restaurant industry is just not something I could deal with anymore. Working every weekend, working every holiday, drugs and alcohol available all the time. Yeah,
I get it.
You're not
working the late night shift with the type of people that are working usually are involved in alcohol and drugs.
Your restaurant closes at midnight. There's a bar open till 2. You're not tired. You're gonna go hang out and have a couple beers or do whatever. And again, that's just not the lifestyle that I want to live anymore. And so even though I had a good restaurant job, it was the lifestyle and all the extras that came with it. I wasn't comfortable doing it anymore. So thankfully I got involved in a real estate company, and also didn't like that. So, but then I started my drone company, and had a couple of guys that they were already doing some stuff, and we came together and started doing like emergency management with drones, and I designed a mosquito control program using drones that we're trying to get going. And that led into some other things, and then I met with the FRRC, like I was telling you earlier about meeting up with Neil, and then they gave me a position as a policy fellow, so I was able to work on policy with them. So after Amendment 4 passed, we worked on what was called Bill. It was 7066.
So Amendment 4 changed in 2016? 2018.
Yep.
So and just to clarify, that's restoring rights for felons to be able to vote again.
Yep. And then 7066, which was the legislation that came out afterwards, was trying to limit it as much as possible to, cut people out in different ways. The first version came out, it was very small population of people who are going to get their voting rights back. Now it's anyone, unless there's a felony sex offense or a murder charge. So unless you have either of those, then you're automatically eligible to go register to vote as soon as you're done with your time probation, as long as you don't have anything else and paid all your fines and fees. 7066 came about because of the fines and fees. So even though you finished your time, finished probation, did whatever you need to do, but you still owed court fines or fees, then you were still not eligible. So the fight back and forth was, well, let's try to get people, if they're truly indigent, like how can we get them so that they can get their rights restored? So we had a big battle back and forth with the governor, and I ended up making friends with some of our adversaries, and that was where I really came in key there of dealing with conservative voices on that. Was just going in, sharing my story and talking about how this is affecting people. And so we got some movement on it. It ended up being a win-win situation, a win for us and a win for the state, because the way 7066 passed was that if you still had fines and fees. It was completion of sentence. So if you have not completed your sentence, including fines and fees, then you are not eligible. If you did everything you're supposed to do, automatically eligible for everyone that was under the umbrella. For the people that didn't, or that still owed fines and fees, FRC started a fines and fees group. So they had a whole part of their organization that was going around finding people that were truly indigent, that really needed the help, and then they paid their fines, and then they paid their fines and fees. Right. So 2020, as this is all, so 2019 7066 is done. 2020 happens.
I would like to first, on behalf of myself and a lot of people out there, 2020 was the very first time as a felon I was able to vote. I would like to say thank you and give you your flowers to that, because I voted twice already, and I feel very normalized by being able to do that.
It was my first time to vote too.
Yeah.
So what happened is we started this whole thing. So 2020 happens, everything's shutting down, nobody's going to work. We're paying everybody's fines and fees. We gave $30 million back to the state of Florida while nobody else was able to do that. We paid pretty much everybody's clerk of courts salaries. So we even got I was down here at the Lee County clerk and got to hand them the big Price is Right size check, and it said $600,000, and got to hand it over to them.
Oh, wow.
So
just from this group that came through and paid, including all the other people that decided they want to just pay up all their past dues so they can get their rights restored and be able to vote.
So as long as you went through an application process, it was for people that needed it. So it wasn't just like, hey, I got a felony and I don't want to pay my fines and fees. Can you pay mine so I can get it? It was, you had to have extenuating circumstances. But again, $30 million of money that they said 80% of that money would have never come back to the state. Just that's how fines and fees work. Most people, 80% of it doesn't come back.
Does that get wiped off after a certain amount of time?
No.
I think in the federal system it's like 10 years or 20 years that there is a timeline when that drops at any restitution.
No, at least not in the state of Florida.
Okay.
Because there was a woman that owed like $17 million in fines and fees and restitution.
And penalties and fines. And interest rates are probably continuing to.
So, and then there was another woman that did pay almost all of it off and missed like a last payment and all the interest. They charged her interest on it. So she missed one payment. She thought she had paid it off, thought she was done. Missed one payment and didn't know for like 5 years. So she had interest adding up on this one payment.
Did this group pay hers off?
No, she ended up working with the state, and the state worked with her.
Okay.
And she was even still with that though, she wouldn't have been eligible because she has a good job and she's able to, but so she had to go a whole different route. But the thing is like she didn't know. And and that's one of the things we're working on now is trying to get a database set up for people being released. So you can go in and be like, okay, this is everything I need to do for the court. This is what I need to do to be eligible for these rights. This is what I need to do to get clemency. Like, we need a database like that. And that was one of the things that was supposed to be done in 2019 that we're still trying to get done today. So I like to remind the governor of that every once in a while and be like, hey.
Do you think that if you would not have gone through the system, that you would have put your focus on these type of laws?
Absolutely not. When I do my public speaking, when I do go into these groups, I'm like, I completely understand if you are like, I don't have any interest in this, because I didn't have any interest in this. I would not have cared, and I understand that people don't care unless you go through it. And so again, that's why I try to be as authentic as possible, because I try to share through my story about how real the situation is. And one of my favorite instances of that was there was a panel up in St. Pete that was talking, and it was like, Deputy Director FRC, State Senator, State Representative, and another organization's director. And they're talking, and it's at St. Pete University, and I'm there early, and I walk in, and two students walk in, and they see what the topic is, and they're like, ugh, we gotta listen to this. As we're all leaving after the whole thing, those same two students walked by me, and I spoke for a second. They're like, man, I had no idea any of this was going on or anything was like this. So the fact that those two kids that I heard that were upset they had to hear it came up to me afterwards after I spoke and was like, thank you for sharing it and opening their eyes. That's how I know I'm on the right path, because I get that all the time.
You shine a light on a very serious topic that a lot of people that have never gone through it really don't even care about it.
Yep.
So now we're we've dealt with Amendment 4. We've got that rights restored, but we're changing governors, and through changing governors, we have pardons on the table.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on with that?
Yeah, so I'll give you a little bit of background as far as how the clemency process works. So Jeb Bush, I don't remember what years they were exactly, but Jeb Bush as governor approved 80,000 clemency cases. Charlie Crist, following governor, did about 120,000 clemency cases. So these are people that got their rights restored one way or another, whether it was their full rights restored, a pardon, their gun rights, whatever it may be. There's different sections to the clemency of how much you want to get back and what you're eligible for. So when it comes to Rick Scott, 8,000. So we went from 200,000 over 2 governors to just less than 8,000 with Rick Scott. And that really backed up the system. I mean, that was causing 10, 12, 17-year wait lists to be able to just get your rights restored.
So people are constantly getting their name put on the list, but the amount of people that are actually passing through has dropped down to 5%.
That, and he wasn't approving anybody. Even when he did have his clemency hearings, he wouldn't, he only approved 8,000 people. So some people were getting through, but there's a video of him where the guy's like, what else do I need to do? And Rick Scott was like, come back next time. When's that going to be? 10 years from now? So there's a lot of issues with that. I'm in the process to get my pardon and get through my clemency soon here. And you have to go through the clemency board. So the clemency board is agriculture commissioner, CFO, attorney general, and the governor. And 3 of those 4 have to approve you to be able to get your clemency.
Can anybody apply, or is it restricted on certain charges?
You can apply. There are certain timelines for certain charges. So I think it's 10 years after you've completed your sentence for a violent charge and 5 years after a nonviolent. But there is a time frame after your charge before you can apply for clemency. But it doesn't matter what your charge is, as long as you wait that wait period, the initial wait period, then you can apply.
And how do you apply?
So it's the clemency board. It's SCORE, I believe it is. So it's the Florida. I think it's SCORE, but it's the clemency board. You can go on there. It's website. They have an application you download. You fill out the application. You get whatever court records they require for you. So whatever your last court records were that show your charges, take the application, you put those records together, you send it off, and then you wait. And then
17 years.
Up to, and then you just wait for them to call your name. Then you go and have your hearing. So even though you've applied, doesn't guarantee anything. Now you have to go have the hearing in front of the board, and then the board decides whether you get your rights back or not.
Do you know what the percentages of?
DeSantis has been pretty good. I don't know what his actual percentage is. I've actually watched him in some of his clemency hearings, and the one guy wasn't asking for a pardon. He just wanted his gun rights back. And DeSantis ended up giving him a full pardon. And the guy's like, I don't even need that. He's like, trust me, take it, because the guy just wanted his gun right. He wanted to go hunting. He was a good old boy from North Florida that got caught up in something.
And probably realizing that the laws that he broke at the time probably don't even exist anymore. Yeah. With marijuana becoming, for the most part legal, at least medical purposes, in Florida. And a lot of people got caught up on stuff like that. And it kind of, it tarnished your record for something that in today's day you wouldn't even get locked up for.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm excited about, and there's obviously a lot of controversy about the presidential election and stuff like that, but Trump has been really good on criminal justice reform. He did the First Step Act, which that changed some of the rules as far as over sentencing. People had marijuana charges that had these federal charges that were over sentenced. I can't think of his name, but I
absolutely. Actually, I watched that where that she was like the grandma, and she did a huge amount of time, and he literally pardoned him that same day. She walked right out, and I want to say that even Kim Kardashian helped streamline the situation and bring a lot of cases that today don't even make any sense, but because they were fought and they were cased under different laws at different times, that they got ridiculous amount of sentences for literally for weed.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, if you look at the other side, Vice President Harris, she was locking people up for longer than they needed to be with, drug charges. And it was just like, I liked going into different circles and people like, who are you voting for? I'd be like, the best criminal justice candidate.
Yeah.
And then they'd be like, who's that? And then I'd be able to have that conversation.
We actually had that conversation on the podcast a few days ago where we spoke on whether you were red or blue, and really it really comes down to what laws benefit who at what time, and that's what we should be looking at. We shouldn't be focused on the person or the party. We should be focused on what actions are they doing, what changes are they making to the laws that as U.S. citizens, because we all have somebody down the line that's been locked up for something that they probably shouldn't have, and we know a lot of people that are in there for doing things that they need to be. They're in the right place, but at the same time, with the laws from the 80s, the crack law, the 100-to-1, is the protecting the drug with the gun, you get the 10-year and the 5-year. It's a little bit of an overkill for a lot of the things that are happening, and there's so much talent that's being lost behind the wall. Yourself, you did 5 years and you came out creating reform and changing laws, from prison. So I think that I'm sorry to hear that you had to go through that, but I'm glad that we have people that can put a light to those subjects.
One of the best ways that I heard it, former Senator or State Senator Brandis up in Pinellas County, he would put it this way: we have a plan for the people that we're scared of. We need a plan for the people that we're mad at. Because drug charges, stuff that my charges, I didn't maliciously go out and cause harm. I got in an accident. People are mad at me. You're not scared of me. People that we're scared of go to prison. They stay in prison. They're locked away. The people that we're mad at, which is the 95% that I was talking about before, they're coming home, and we have no plan in place for them. So why wouldn't they just go back? You're going to go back to the same circumstances that led you to incarceration in the first place. And again, this is why that mentor program was so important to me, was because I wanted to break that cycle of going back to those circumstances. What is a different direction? I think it was with you, I was talking earlier. It's like, what makes you think that's the decision that you have to make? Why did you think robbing that bank or holding up that store or even just selling those drugs on the street? Why did you think that was your best decision?
Influence. I think we're influenced. We see where we want to be, and we don't always see the best path to get there. And when we look left and right, I see a jack boy over here, I see a dope boy over there, so I'm gonna steal and sell. And whichever one comes first or faster.
But if you understand that why, that's the core. That's one of the core roots. Like, why did I drink and drive? Because influence. I was having drinks with my buddy. So I really like to break that down and get people. The first 2 weeks when I was doing the mentor program, the first 2 weeks was all about introspection. It was kind of like a mini version of what I did for myself in confinement. Then the next 6 weeks was all about job development and housing placement and getting in these. Like, my goal was to have job fairs inside the jail before they come out, to give them opportunity, give them careers. Don't go back to the hood and go slinging on the street again when we can potentially find you. It may not be the greatest job, it might not be your overall career, but it would be something different to get you out of. Let's find you a $25 an hour job.
Absolutely, and that is so important, because the problem is that we provided before we went in and somebody took care of us. We come out with a felony, and a lot of people didn't have much on-job training before they went in because they were into the fast money or they were into different things. And we come out and we're expected from the house that we're now staying at, whether it be you going back to living with your wife or you going back to living with a girlfriend or your parents. Now it's like, well, how are you going to make up for this time, and what are you doing? So initially you think, well, you have these great ideas. You got the box full of ideas, but they're not panning out fast enough. And when you go outside and your friends realize, and the people that you used to deal with realize that you're back on the street, it's very easy to shake moves on the street versus going and applying for 10 jobs, 9 people telling you no, one guy telling you maybe. By the time you get the job, waiting 2 weeks to get paid, and you literally are now becoming a nuisance in your household, where they're like, wait a minute, you know, you're an extra mouth to feed. There wasn't enough going around as it was. Now you're out and you become an extra burden, and they expect you to be like Superman,
right.
you know, and they don't realize that you just went through the toughest period of your life. You come out worse than you went in, and now you have higher expectations than day one. So it's easy. It's just the easy road, but it's not the only road.
Yep.
And that's what we have to shine a light on. We have to create those programs where the job fair, the list where they realize what they have to do, where they can go, what jobs are felon friendly. And some places have these programs. There are some states that have really, really good rehabilitation programs, and there's some states that completely lack in that department. And it's very sad when all you're doing is creating career criminals. Not on purpose, but at the end of the day, if I have nothing else to do and I have few kids and I have somebody looking at me, a chicken, a frog, and a dog, trying to eat, I'm going to do what I got to do. That's just my nature, you know, and then you fall right back into it, and eventually you fall right back into the system because you're in the trap. Yeah.
So imagine if you were able to go to a job fair your last week while you're in jail and be like, I got a job before I even get out.
Absolutely. You mentioned when you were in prison, sorry to bring you back to this, but you mentioned when you were in prison that you taught some classes. You taught some courses. What were those courses, and how did they benefit people that were coming out?
So there was a couple different things. So the Toastmasters group, I was the president of that group, and like I said, we had 36 guys that joined that. Teaching about public speaking. It's 10 courses of being able to give your speech, and then it's 10 courses of leadership skills. So you get different jobs, and you got to be a timer. You got to do table topics. Table topics is you give a random topic to talk about, and you pick somebody out of the crowd, and they got to talk about it for 2 minutes. So
like improv.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a lot of fun. So we brought that program in, had fantastic success with that. Even got the area governor of that group to come and watch us at the facility that we were at. So she would come into the prison and enjoy our Toastmasters group. So we did that. We had a culinary program that was really good. That was when I got my culinarian certification through the state. Was able to use that. That was super cool. But we ended up going and taking that culinary program and competing in a international food competition. So it was the Chef of the Americas competition, and it was held in South Beach. And they had already been doing the culinary program, but me and another guy were actual chefs and come in and kind of bumped it up. So now we got this group of 10 of guys that really learned a lot and got certified, and some of them are still chefs today. But we went and did this competition and ended up winning a silver medal. It was 32 teams, 16 countries, and we won a silver medal through it. And was just nobody had any idea we were from a prison.
Wow.
So we went and did that. That was really cool.
So you were competing against civilians.
Yeah. Yep.
So you guys that are on controlled moves, limited to the amount of time that you can even be in these workspaces, training and doing these different things, because you have to check out if you're using a knife or using anything, you have to check that out, and you have to versus people that are in the real world that have access to have
their own stuff. Right. I'm using state supplied kitchen knife, and so he's got his nice Henkels that are thousands of dollars
rolled out.
Yeah, right.
So there's nothing that's impossible.
No, nope.
So it's a mindset at that point.
Yeah. The last thing that I'll bring up as far as the classes, so we started a couple different things too. But the last one I really want to bring up it was called Malachi Dads, and it was started with Awana, which is kind of like Kairos, or these groups that go into prisons and do education or spiritual guidance, stuff like that. So this was started at the farm in Louisiana, the largest prison in the country. This program was started there, and it was to have a better relationship with your children. So it was journaling, writing letters, doing workbook, doing all these things so that when you came home, you had already built this relationship back with your kids. I don't have any kids, but I had a pained relationship with my parents just because I was feeling guilty. They were spending money on me, and I wanted to come back better. So I was like, can I take this course from the kids' perspective? And the pastor from the church was like, we never thought of that. Yeah, let's do that. So there were 6 of us that got to do that. And the pastor was so impressed with what we had done that he comes to us, and one morning he's like, I can't get you tickets to the game, but I can take you to the breakfast the day before the Super Bowl in Miami. So in 2010, I got to go to the breakfast at the Bart Starr Award and see the Colts and the Saints and see Kurt Warner win the Bart Starr Award right before the 2010 Super Bowl the day before. And it was me and 5 other guys and one of our officers sitting at the table in the back just getting to do this stuff.
Sounds like you did greater things
right?
in prison than when you was on the street.
Right.
But the fact that a lot of people think that the same thought you had for 3.5 years, my life is over.
Mm-hmm.
Your life is just beginning. And if you take the opportunity while you're there, you can become a better criminal.
Yeah.
And
that was my biggest fear.
That's very easy. But if you take that and you become more educated and you learn and get degrees, and there's so much things that you can do with your time, health, books, spiritual, getting closer with God, that you can come out and it can be literally the greatest thing that ever happened to you if you deal with it the right way.
Mm-hmm.
You could also get caught up in, running some schemes and doing some things, running a poker table or doing a little store. But if you utilize your time, you got the same 24 hours, you're just in a control situation, which for some people, like you mentioned, is actually better because as humans, we strive for structure, order, and all these things that we don't typically have on the streets. If we want to go out of the store and grab a beer, if we want to go buy some drugs, we can do that. If we want to, we have access to that. And I'm not saying that you don't have access to that in prison, because the same things that are on the streets are in prison. But being that you have control moves, you start to think about your time a little bit more wisely. When I can only move a certain amount of minutes every hour, I can only get to the library so often, I can only keep so much in my locker, then you really start to appreciate through scarcity what is important. And a lot of people come out very educated, with physical, with different degrees in physical trainer. You have people that study philosophy with the 500 plus books that you read. So it could be the greatest thing that ever happened to a person. Yep. And it's almost, we're forged in the fire. So when you're in the fire, you don't realize that it's a blessing to have gone through that. And the greatest gift that you could really deal with is going through those problems. Because when you come out a different person. And in the moment, nobody wants to hear that.
Yep.
Because for 5 years, if you could snap your fingers and be home in your bed, you would have been home in your bed. But the day you walked out of there and you look back, you wouldn't have traded for nothing in the world.
Yep.
And that is something to really be grateful for. Not thankful that what happened. A good friend of yours died. You missed a lot of time in your life, but it wasn't wasted time. And a lot of people feel like it's the end of the road, and it's really just the beginning.
I'd even put it this way. My life did end that day, but it was that life. And I put it now, what I was doing that time when I was using drugs and that 3.5 years in between where I was just trying to not be here, that was me going into my ego death. So once I got to prison, that was when the ego death happened. That was, I went to that confinement, and that was when everything was stripped away. And a lot of people talk about that in philosophy, where they're, talk about, you gotta your ego has to die before you can actually move forward. And that is exactly what happened to me. That day, that version of me died, and I had to be somebody different. I just didn't know what was going to happen. But I remember even the next day, like being in the hospital, being like, something felt weird about it. Like obviously I was very distraught and very upset and all the other things that would come with something like that. But I just remember being like, why did God pick me to survive this with relatively no repercussions? I got a scar on the back of my head. That's it. But why did I live through this? And so to have that thought so early on, of like, I almost feel like God kind of went, because all the other accident was over there. I was over here. And it was almost like he was like, not you. Everything else is over here. And so to have that thought and to have, to get into the theology of what I was getting into, I read every religious book that I could, whatever religion it was, because I wanted to understand God more. And by going through that, I would have never done any of those things had I not died on the street that day too. So yeah, my life was over.
So even though your physical body didn't do it,
Yep.
your spiritual body died and
reincarnated.
Was born again.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So, but yeah, that's. I would never wish anything like that on anybody, but man, I wish that people could get the benefits out of it like I did.
So today, before this afternoon, I had never met you.
Mm-hmm.
Ran into you in downtown Fort Myers.
Yep.
You had just finished bumping into the mayor. What was your intentions? What was today, when you showed up to this city, what was on your mind? Because you don't even live here.
Yeah. So I'm in the process of moving back, but I work as a lobbyist for the policy standard. And mainly what I was doing today was just kind of walk around, seeing who I run into, trying to get back plugged in with people that I know and love. And one of the things I love about Fort Myers is that you can just go downtown, walk around, and you'll run into somebody, So I didn't have a set plan for today, and I was trying to think of like what I want to do for some office space. And it ended up, I was walking around, I just kept running into people. And I actually left when Matt had called me back, and I was like, oh, I'll come back. And then I ended up sitting down with you guys, and you asked if I could do this tonight. And I was like, cool, let's do it, man. So thankfully I got a haircut today, so I was ready to go.
Right on time. How does the lobbyist work, and is there somewhere people can find you?
Yeah, so the Policy Standard, that is the name of our organization I work for now. So we lobby for all kinds of different organizations and different causes and issues. So like we work on some autism issues, obviously criminal justice issues. I work on environmental issues as well. So one of the things that I've been able to kind of niche out for myself is that I give a conservative view to more liberal issues. So like I care about the environment, I care about criminal justice. These things are usually looked at as more liberal issues, but we need to have voices from both sides so that we can get stuff done. Not just, I'm not doing that because that's theirs, I'm not doing that because that's theirs. That's not how we're going to get anything done. So I try to go into circles more likely where I'm not necessarily welcomed. And I don't mean that in a bad way, just I'm not the typical person that would go into some of these circles, and I try to give voice to that. So when I find clients like that need a voice up in Tallahassee, so I represent them in Tallahassee, try to get different legislation passed, different bills passed. One of the bills I'm working on right now is a housing bill. So for people like us, it's very hard for us to be able to rent a property. Property management companies will not rent to us because we check the box and it says felon, and it doesn't matter who we are, it just matters that we check the box. So trying to work on that so it makes it easier. Like I said, I'm in the process of moving, so I'm actually documenting everything I'm going through right now.
And when you say make it easier, do you mean changing the timelines on applications so it doesn't have to go back 10 years where they say if you had a felony or a charge?
The idea would be more like ban the box, so you don't have to check the box and then do an interview. Gotcha. So if you let me so if I go in and I pay my $100 application fee and I check the box and you're never going to call me back because I checked the box, then what's the point? I just spent $100, and you as the property management doesn't have to tell me that I'm automatically disqualified. It's just I already know that I am. So that's why usually we do it the fraudulent way and we check the no, and it's almost like going back to saying I'd rather ask for forgiveness than ask for permission. So what this would do would be it wouldn't be the automatic no just from paper. It would be you could get an interview, you can sit down. If you get a no in an interview, I can't do anything about that, but at least you got a chance to present yourself. Because I know if you look at me on paper and you see all this and you're like, and you got somebody else, but then you get to know me and know the work that I do and the passion that I have for the community, might be more likely to give me an opportunity than just because I had to check that box. So that's a bill that I'm working on.
Do you got a website or a phone number that somebody can contact you at if they're interested in supporting this?
Yeah, for sure. There's a couple other things too. So there's nonprofits that we're working on, something I would talk to you about later. where we're trying to get. I have a former corrections officer that I work with, and then I'm a former inmate. So we're trying to do this inmates and officers nonprofit where we come together as a think tank. So we have people that are formerly convicted, and we have corrections officers, and we get together and we sit down and actually have conversations about
from both sides of the aisle.
Yep, about what does good look like. So yeah, my name Lance Wissinger. You can find me on Facebook. That's an easy way to find me. I'll give you my phone number. It's 239-770-0465. That's my personal number, so that's the number I always have. Anybody wants to reach out and has questions, I would say your best way is to text me. Just text me, let me know who you are and what's up. But we're always looking for investors into these nonprofits. We're always looking for fundraisers. We're working on campaigns as well, so candidates that want to get involved, we'll help them get going, and run a race to, if you're a good candidate and you think you got a good chance at representing your community, we'll come talk to you and get you set up with a campaign. Or if anybody needs help, that's the biggest thing. If you need help, if you are looking for somebody to lobby for you up in Tallahassee, even if you just have a question, I'm happy to help out. Sometimes it's just quick little, like, I don't know what to do, give me a call and point you in the right direction. If I don't know, I'll find someone in the right direction. But yeah, the biggest thing is and it doesn't necessarily matter about what the issue is, it's that if it needs to be done in Tallahassee, or even locally, there's some of the county issues that can be done. You can come talk to me or our company, and we'll go work something out and represent you. Kind of like a lawyer represents you in court, we'll represent you in the legislature.
Absolutely. Well, I want to say thank you. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you.
Thank you for being on Pros and Cons. We're flipping the script, and I appreciate your time. It was, you dropped some major gems, and I think there's some great takeaways from this. And there's somebody out there, if not many people, that are going to be able to benefit from the things that you've already put in place and the things that you're still putting in place. And yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you, brother.